When my grandfather left me his entire estate worth $2 million, my parents and brother didn't congratulate me. They ambushed me. They demanded I sign over everything to save the family. At the emergency family meeting they arranged, I revealed something that left them speechless. This is how I learned that sometimes the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong. It's between your family's expectations and your own self-worth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I never thought I'd become the villain in my family's story. Growing up, I was always Lindsay the reliable, Lindsay the responsible, Lindsay the one who never caused trouble. My brother Jason was the golden child, the charismatic entrepreneur, with big dreams who just needed a little more support to make it. I'm sitting in my apartment now, looking at the skyline of Boston through my window, wondering how everything changed so drastically in just 8 months. The apartment is small, but mine, really mine. No co-signers, no family loans, no strings. Attached. That's worth more to me now than any square footage or luxury amenities. Let me start from the beginning. My grandfather Walter was a quiet, methodical man who built his fortune from nothing. He grew up during the Depression, served in Korea, then returned home to start a manufacturing business that created specialized parts for industrial machinery. Nothing glamorous, but steady and profitable. He lived modestly despite his wealth. In the same 4-bedroom colonial house where my mom grew up. Growing up, I spent every Sunday afternoon at Grandpa Walter's house. While my parents and brother would usually find excuses to skip these visits, I genuinely enjoyed our time together. We'd play chess. He never let me win. Work on his vintage car collection in the garage, or just sit on his porch drinking lemonade while he told stories about the old days. Wealth doesn't make a person, Lindsay, he'd often tell me, his voice gravelly from years of smoking pipes. What makes a person is what they build with their own 2 hands and how they treat others when nobody's watching. I took his lessons to heart. After college, while Jason was launching his 3rd guaranteed success business venture with my parents' financial backing, I got an entry-level position at an environmental engineering firm. The pay wasn't great, but the work was meaningful, and I was good at it. I lived within my means, saved diligently, and slowly worked my way up. My relationship with my family was complicated. My parents, Diana and Robert, weren't bad people, but they had always operated with a clear hierarchy of attention and resources. Jason first, everyone else second. When Jason needed $50,000 to start his fitness app company, they took out a second mortgage. When I needed help with student loans, they suggested I build character by working through college. "Your brother is building something important," Mom would say, her voice tinged with the reverence usually reserved for discussing religious figures. "He's going to change the world. We need to support his vision." I learned early on not to compete for their attention or resources. I built my life separately, created my own support systems, found mentors at work, and made friends who valued me for who I was, not where I fell in some family pecking order. Grandpa Walter passed away quietly in his sleep 3 months ago, at the age of 86. Despite our close relationship, his death hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't just family. He was the one person who had always seen me clearly, who valued my practical nature and quiet determination. The funeral was small, just as he would have wanted. My parents seemed appropriately sad, but distracted. Jason's latest business was facing cash flow problems, and they spent much of the reception huddled in corners with him, speaking in urgent whispers. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a call from Mr. Harmon, Grandpa's attorney. "Lindsay, we need to discuss your grandfather's estate. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I took the morning off work and drove to the small law office in Grandpa's hometown. Mr. Harmon was an older man with silver hair and horn-rimmed glasses who had been my grandfather's friend for over 40 years. "Thank you for coming, Lindsay," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat across from his cluttered desk. I'll get right to the point. Your grandfather left an estate valued at approximately $2 million, including his house, investments, and liquid assets. I nodded, unsurprised that Grandpa had done well for himself, though the specific amount was larger than I'd imagined. What's unusual, Mr. Harmon continued, removing his glasses and fixing me with a direct gaze, is that he's left everything to you, the entire estate. I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. I'm sorry. What? Walter left everything to you, Lindsay. Not your parents, not your brother. You. My mind raced. This couldn't be right. Surely my parents would be hurt, offended. And Jason. Jason would be furious. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Harmon shook his head and slid a document across the desk. No mistake. Walter was very clear about his wishes. He also left you this letter. The envelope was heavy cream-colored stationery with my name written in Grandpa's distinctive, slightly shaky handwriting. I tucked it into my purse, unable to read it in front of Mr. Harmon while still processing this news. Why wouldn't he tell me about this? I asked. Walter was a private man, as you know. He didn't want his decisions to influence your relationship while he was alive. Mr. Harmon hesitated. He also requested that I inform only you initially. Your family will need to be notified for probate purposes, but he wanted you to have time to prepare. Prepare. The word hung ominously in the air between us. Prepare for what? The fallout? The inevitable family drama? How long do I have? I asked. The probate notification will go out next week. I suggest you use that time wisely. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with questions. Why me? What was Grandpa thinking? How would I tell my family? Once home, I made myself a cup of tea, sat at my small kitchen table, and carefully opened the letter. My dearest Lindsay, if you're reading this, then I've moved on to whatever comes next. Don't waste too much time being sad about it. I've had a good run, and I'm ready for the adventure. I've watched you grow from a curious little girl who asked too many questions into a determined young woman who still asks the right ones. I've seen how you've built your life brick by brick, expecting nothing to be handed to you. I've also seen how your family has treated you. Always the reliable one, never the celebrated one. I'm leaving you my estate not because I love you more than the others, though perhaps I do, but because I trust you more. I trust you to use these resources wisely, to build something meaningful, to make decisions based on what truly matters, rather than what shines brightest in the moment. Your brother has great charisma and bigger dreams, but he hasn't learned the value of persistence or the discipline of delayed gratification. Your parents have enabled this throughout his life, and I fear they always will. This inheritance will cause a storm in your family. Be prepared. They may try to convince you that sharing it all equally is the right thing to do. They may guilt you, manipulate you, even threaten to cut you off. Stand firm in the knowledge that this was my choice, made with clear eyes and a sound mind. Remember what I've always told you: wealth doesn't make a person. How you handle this inheritance will reveal your character, not create it. All my love, Grandpa Walter. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just money he'd left me. It was a vote of confidence, a recognition of who I was and the choices I'd made. It was also, I realized with growing dread, a ticking time bomb in my family relationships. For the next 5 days, I told no one. I went to work, met friends for dinner, called my parents for our usual Sunday check-in, where they spent 20 minutes telling me about Jason's latest business pivot, and tried to process my new reality. I made lists, researched financial advisors, and thought long and hard about what I wanted to do with this unexpected windfall. I even allowed myself to dream a little about buying a small house instead of renting forever, about taking that environmental management course I couldn't afford, about starting my own consultation firm someday. The call came exactly a week after my meeting with Mr. Harmon. It was my mother, her voice higher pitched than usual. "Lindsay, we need to talk. There's been some confusion about your grandfather's will." "What confusion?" I asked, playing dumb even as my heart raced. "He's left everything to you. Obviously, this must be a mistake. Your father is meeting with a lawyer tomorrow to contest it." I took a deep breath. "It's not a mistake, Mom. Grandpa was very clear about his wishes." Silence stretched between, as taut as a wire. "You knew?" she finally asked, accusation creeping into her tone. "I found out last week." "And you didn't tell us? Your own family?" I closed my eyes, focusing on keeping my voice steady. I was processing it myself. I needed time to think. "Well, there's nothing to think about. This is clearly unfair. To your father, Walter's own son, and to Jason. We're family. We share things equally." I almost laughed at that. When had anything in our family ever been shared equally? "Mom, this was Grandpa's decision. He must have had his reasons." "His reasons?" Her voice rose sharply. "His reason is that you manipulated him in his old age. You were always over there, always buttering him up. What did you say to him to turn him against the rest of us?" The accusation stung, but I wasn't entirely surprised. This was classic Diana Reynolds behavior. When faced with an uncomfortable truth, find someone else to blame. I never discussed inheritance with Grandpa. Ever. "I don't believe you. We're having a family meeting tomorrow night at our house. 7 p.m. Be there." She hung up before I could respond. I spent that night oscillating between anxiety and determination. I pulled out Grandpa's letter again, drawing strength from his words. Stand firm in the knowledge that this was my choice. By morning, I had made my decision. I would attend the family meeting. I would listen to what they had to say, but I would not allow myself to be bullied or manipulated into giving away what Grandpa had entrusted to me. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the day preparing. I made a detailed spreadsheet of how I planned to use the inheritance responsibly. I reviewed Grandpa's letter and the will documents again. I even practiced responses to the arguments I anticipated they would make. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, my hands were steady and my resolve was firm. This wouldn't be easy, but I owed it to Grandpa, and to myself, to honor his wishes. The scene inside was exactly as I expected. Mom and Dad sat on one side of the dining room table, Jason on the other, with a single chair left empty for me. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and no one bothered with the usual hugs or pleasantries when I entered. "Sit down, Lindsay," Dad said, his voice uncharacteristically stern. He had always been the more easygoing parent, often deferring to Mom in family disputes. Seeing him take charge told me how serious they considered this situation. I sat, placing my bag on the floor beside me but keeping my folder of documents on my lap. "We've been blindsided by this manipulation of your grandfather's estate," Dad began. Walter was not in his right mind toward the end. He was confused, susceptible to influence. "That's not true," I said quietly. "Grandpa was sharp until the very end. You would know that if you'd visited him more often." Dad's face reddened. "Don't take that tone with me, young lady. We're trying to handle this rationally, as a family." Mom leaned forward, her expression softening into the sympathetic look she used when trying to get her way. "Lindsay, honey, we know you didn't intentionally influence your grandfather, but the fact remains that this distribution is deeply unfair. Your father is Walter's only child. Jason is struggling to get his business off the ground. This inheritance could make all the difference for our family." For Jason, you mean? I corrected her. Jason spoke up for the first time, his handsome face arranged in the earnest expression that had charmed investors out of hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. Linz, I know we haven't always been close, but this is a chance to change that. My company is on the verge of a major breakthrough. The algorithm is revolutionary. We just need capital to scale. With Grandpa's money, we could turn this into a family legacy, something we all benefit from. I looked at each of their faces. Mom's calculated sympathy, Dad's righteous indignation, Jason's practiced sincerity. They were so convinced of their own entitlement that they couldn't even conceive of a scenario where Grandpa had made this choice deliberately and with sound judgment. I've made a decision, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. They all leaned forward eagerly, assuming I was about to capitulate. I'm going to honor Grandpa's wishes. The inheritance stays with me. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, all at once, they erupted. You can't be serious. After everything we've done for you. This is pure selfishness. I let them vent for a minute before raising my hand. To my surprise, they actually stopped talking. I came prepared. For this reaction, I said, opening my folder. I want to show you something. I pulled out a stack of paper and placed it on the table. It was a comprehensive financial history that I had compiled. Every time my parents had financially supported Jason over the past 10 years, with dates, amounts, and purposes. Next to it, I placed a much smaller list of the support they had given me. The disparity was stark and undeniable. This isn't about fairness, I said, my voice calm but firm. If it were about fairness, you would have treated us equally all along. This is about Grandpa making a choice based on what he observed in this family for decades. Mom tried to push the papers away. That's ancient history. This is about now, about family loyalty. No, I countered. This is about the patterns that have defined our family. Jason starts businesses that fail. You bail him out. He starts another. You bail him out again. Nothing ever changes because there are no consequences for failure and no incentives to succeed independently. Jason's face darkened. That's a low blow. My businesses haven't failed. They've evolved. The market is volatile. The market isn't the problem, Jason, I interrupted. Your business model is. You chase trends instead of building something sustainable. You spend on flash instead of substance. And why wouldn't you? Mom and Dad have always been your safety net. That's enough, Dad snapped. If you won't reconsider voluntarily, we'll contest the will. We'll show that Walter was not of sound mind. I pulled out another document. Mr. Harmon anticipated that. Grandpa underwent a full cognitive assessment by a geriatric psychiatrist 3 days before signing his final will. He scored in the 95th percentile for his age group. The assessment is included in the legal documentation. The fight seemed to go out of Dad all at once. Mom, however, switched tactics. What about family? She asked, her voice trembling. Does that mean nothing? To you, after all we've sacrificed? Family means everything to me, I replied, feeling a lump form in my throat. But family shouldn't mean sacrificing one member's future for another's. Grandpa saw that happening here. He saw me always coming second, always being asked to give so Jason could take. I turned to face my brother directly. I don't resent you for being the favorite, Jason. That wasn't your fault. But I do resent being expected to keep that pattern going forever. I deserve a chance at the future I want too. I stood up, gathering my documents. I'm willing to help you, Jason. Not with a blank check, but with guidance. I'll connect you with my company's business development team. They can review your business plan, suggest improvements, maybe even introduce you to legitimate investors. But I won't just hand over Grandpa's money to be burned through like all the rest. I looked at each of them. these people who shared my blood but had never truly seen me. I love you all. I hope someday you'll understand that this isn't me being selfish. This is me finally refusing to be invisible. With that, I walked out, my heart pounding, but my steps steady. The weight of their expectations, their disappointment, their anger. I felt it all lifting with each step I took toward my car. I didn't know what would happen next. Whether they would contest the will anyway, whether our relationship could ever heal, whether I would always be the villain in their narrative. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by their perception of me. I was standing in my own truth, honoring not just Grandpa's faith in me, but also my faith in myself. As I drove away from my parents' house that night, I realized that the inheritance wasn't really about the money at all. It was about recognition, value, the right to chart my own course without constantly being redirected to serve someone else's journey. That realization was worth more than any dollar amount could ever be. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning after the family meeting, I woke up feeling something unexpected: peace. Despite the confrontation, despite the angry texts from my mother that had continued well past midnight, despite knowing that the battle was likely far from over, I felt lighter than I had in years. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by my apartment window, watching the city come alive. My phone buzzed with another message. I expected more guilt from my mother, or perhaps a manipulative apology from Jason. Instead, it was from Eliza, my closest friend since college. "How did it go? Still on for breakfast? You're going to need pancakes for this debrief." I smiled and texted back, "Definitely still on. Need pancakes and bacon." 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Eliza in our favorite diner, recounting the previous night's showdown. "So you actually walked out? Just like that?" Eliza's eyes were wide with both shock and admiration. As someone who had witnessed my family dynamics firsthand over the years, she knew how monumental this stance was for me. "Just like that," I confirmed, cutting into my stack of blueberry pancakes. I've spent my entire life trying to earn their approval, trying to be good enough, despite never being Jason. Last night, I finally realized I don't need their approval to validate my choices. Eliza reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Linz. That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I admitted. "But you know what's weird? The hardest part wasn't standing up to them. It was realizing that I could have done it years ago. I've been giving away my power for so long that I forgot I had any." "So, what happens now? With the money, I mean." I took a deep breath, excitement bubbling up as I shared my plans aloud for the first time. "I'm going to be smart about it. Grandpa wouldn't want me to squander this opportunity. First, I'm meeting with a financial advisor next week, someone Mr. Harmon recommended who specializes in sudden wealth management." "Smart move," Eliza nodded approvingly. "I'm thinking I'll allocate it in thirds," I continued, warming to my topic. 1/3 for long-term investments and retirement. 1/3 for education and professional development. I'm going to finally take that environmental management certification course and maybe even apply for that executive MBA program I've been eyeing. "And the last third?" I smiled, feeling a thrill of possibility. "Seed money for my own environmental consulting firm. I've been drafting business plans for years, you know that. Helping companies transition to sustainable practices without sacrificing profitability. I've got the technical knowledge from my current job and the client contacts. What I've never had is the capital to strike out on my own." Eliza's face lit up. "Lindsay Reynolds, environmental entrepreneur. I love it. Your grandfather would be so proud." "I hope so," I said softly. "I want to build something that honors his legacy." "Speaking of legacy," Eliza's expression grew more serious. What about the house? Are you going to sell it? I shook my head. No, not right away. I'm going to move into it, actually. It needs some updating, but the bones are good and it's in a great neighborhood. Plus, I hesitated, feeling slightly embarrassed by the sentiment. It feels like home. It's the one place where I've always felt valued for exactly who I am. Eliza smiled knowingly. That's worth more than the real estate value. Exactly. And it's close enough to the city that I can still commute to work, at least until I get my business off the ground. We finished our breakfast, and as we were paying the bill, Eliza asked the question I'd been dreading. What about your family? Do you think they'll really contest the will? I don't know, I admitted. Dad seemed deterred when I mentioned the cognitive assessment, but Mom was still furious. And Jason. I sighed. Jason never gives up easily when money is involved. Well, whatever happens, you're not facing it alone, Eliza said firmly. You've got me, and I've got a lawyer. Brother who'd love nothing more than to help stick it to entitled family members. I laughed, grateful for her unwavering support. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But of course it did. 3 days later, I received a formal letter from a law firm representing my parents. They were indeed contesting the will, claiming undue influence, essentially arguing that I had manipulated my grandfather into leaving me everything. The evidence they cited was thin. The frequency of my visits, the exclusion of my father as the direct descendant, and an alleged comment my grandfather had once made at a family gathering about taking care of all his family. I forwarded the letter to Mr. Harmon, who called me within the hour. This is precisely why Walter took the precautionary measures he did, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. The cognitive assessment, the detailed letter explaining his reasoning, the video, testament. Video testament? I repeated, surprised. You never mentioned a video. Because Walter asked me not to unless it became necessary. He recorded a video statement the same day he signed the will, explaining in his own words why he was leaving. His estate to you and addressing any potential challenges. He was. Mr. Harmon chuckled softly. He was quite thorough in his rebuttal of the exact arguments your family is now making. Relief washed over me. So this challenge won't succeed? It would be very unlikely. However, legal battles, even unsuccessful ones, can be protracted and expensive. Your grandfather anticipated this possibility as well. In the event of a challenge to his will, he authorized me to share the video not just with the court, but with all parties involved. I understood what he was suggesting. If my parents see the video, they might drop the challenge. Precisely. It would be less painful for everyone. Walter was quite candid in his assessment of your family dynamics. I mulled this over. A part of me wanted them to see it, to hear directly from Grandpa why he had made his choice. But another part hesitated. Such a video would likely contain criticisms of my parents and brother that could irreparably damage our already strained relationship. Can I view it first? I asked. Of course. You can come to my office tomorrow. The next morning, I sat in Mr. Harmon's conference room as he loaded the video on a large screen. He excused himself to give me privacy, closing the door behind him. The screen flickered to life, and there was Grandpa Walter, sitting in his favorite armchair in the study. He looked thin but alert, his blue eyes as sharp as ever beneath bushy white eyebrows. He was wearing his good sweater, the cable-knit cardigan he saved for holidays and special occasions. "Hello, Lindsay," he began, and I felt tears spring to my eyes at the sound of his voice. "If you're watching this, it means your family is challenging my decision, just as I suspected they might." He shifted in his chair, leaning forward slightly. "I want to be clear about why I've left my estate to you. It's not because I don't love your father or Jason. It's because I've watched how this family operates for decades, and I've seen how your potential and needs have consistently been sacrificed for your brother's ambitions. Grandpa detailed specific instances: my college fund that had been borrowed to support Jason's first business, the family trips canceled when his ventures needed cash infusions, the way my achievements were acknowledged briefly while his attempts were celebrated, lavishly regardless of outcome. Robert and Diana aren't bad people, he continued, referring to my parents. But they've created a damaging imbalance in how they distribute their emotional and financial resources between their children. They've turned Jason into a perpetual taker with an inflated sense of entitlement. And they've made you feel that your only value lies in what you can provide to others. He leaned back, his expression softening. You, Lindsay, have shown responsibility, resilience, and integrity. You've built your life brick by brick, expecting nothing to be handed to you. These are the values I tried to live by, the values that built my business and my fortune. I'm entrusting my legacy to you because you already embody the principles that matter most to me. His eyes seemed to look directly into mine as he concluded. Stand firm, Lindsay. You deserve this chance. Build something meaningful. And remember that generosity stems from strength, not obligation. Help your family if you choose to, but on your terms, not from guilt or manipulation. The video ended, and I sat in silence, tears streaming down my face. His words had articulated feelings I'd never been able to fully express, validating the sense of inequality I'd experienced throughout my life, but had often dismissed as oversensitivity or selfishness. When Mr. Harmon returned, I'd made my decision. Send them the video, I said quietly. All of it. He nodded solemnly. I'll arrange for them to view it here tomorrow. I spent that evening in a strange emotional state, vulnerable yet empowered, sad yet validated. I wondered how my family would react to Grandpa's blunt assessment of their behavior. Would they recognize the truth in his words, or would they dismiss him as a bitter old man who didn't understand their intentions? My phone remained silent the next day. No angry calls, no accusatory texts. The silence was both a relief and oddly unsettling. Finally, as I was leaving work, my phone rang. It was my father. Lindsay, he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. We need to talk, not at the house, somewhere neutral. We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop halfway between our homes. When I arrived, I was surprised to find only my father waiting. No Mom, no Jason. They don't know I'm here, he explained as I sat down across from him. Your mother is still processing, and Jason is angry. And you? I asked cautiously. Dad sighed deeply, running a hand through his graying hair. I'm ashamed. Watching that video, hearing my father speak so plainly about how we've treated you, it forced me to see our family through his eyes. Through your eyes. He looked up at me, his expression pained. Has it really been that bad, Lindsay? Have we really favored Jason so blatantly? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected continued anger, perhaps a more nuanced manipulation. Attempt, but not this apparent sincerity. Yes, I said simply. It has. He winced, but nodded. The worst part is, I didn't even see it. I told myself we were just supporting Jason's potential, that you were fine because you never seemed to need us as much. I didn't realize. His voice cracked slightly. I didn't realize that you'd stopped asking because you knew the answer would always be no. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. For the first time in my adult life, my father was seeing me, really seeing me. We're dropping the challenge to the will, he continued. It was wrong. Dad made his choice, and he had his reasons. Good. Reasons, it turns out. Relief washed over me. Thank you. Don't thank me for doing what should have been obvious from the start. Dad took a deep breath. I can't speak for your mother or brother, but I want to try to repair our relationship. I don't expect forgiveness right away, or maybe ever, but I want you to know that I'm going to work on being better, on seeing you clearly." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Part of me wanted to leap at this olive branch, to embrace any chance to heal our fractured family. But another part, the part that had finally learned to stand up for myself, recognized that words were easy. Change was hard. "I'd like that," I finally said, "but I need time, and I need to see real effort, not just good intentions." "That's fair," he agreed. "More than fair, actually." We talked for another hour, more openly than we had in years. He told me that my mother was still convinced that Grandpa had been manipulated, if not by me, then by Mr. Harmon. Jason had stormed out of the lawyer's office halfway through the video, declaring that Grandpa was playing favorites from beyond, the grave. "Give them time," Dad advised. "This has been a shock for all of us. A wake-up call, I hope, but still a shock." As we prepared to leave, he asked tentatively, "What are your plans? For the inheritance, I mean." I hesitated, then decided to be transparent. I outlined my 3-part plan: invest, educate, and build my own business. Dad listened attentively, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he said, "That sounds very responsible. Very you." He smiled slightly. Dad would approve. "I think so too," I agreed. "If you ever want advice on the business side of things, not that you need it, I'm here. No strings attached." The offer surprised me. But there were also triumphant highs: landing my first major client, hiring my first employee, a brilliant recent graduate who reminded me of myself at that age, seeing my company logo on business cards and the modest office space I leased in a renovated industrial building downtown. Throughout these months of change, I maintained my weekly ritual of sitting in Grandpa's study on Sunday evenings, reflecting on the week gone by and planning for the one ahead. Sometimes I imagined I could feel his presence, approving of the careful yet courageous way I was building my new life. In those quiet moments, I would often reread his letter or watch snippets of his video testimony, drawing strength from his unwavering belief in me. One brisk October evening, as I sat updating my business plan to accommodate faster-than-expected growth, my phone rang. It was Jason, his voice tense with excitement. "We got it! The Mercer contract. They just signed." I felt a surge of pride, both in him and in my decision to take a chance on his business. Mercer Industries was a significant regional manufacturer, and securing them as a client was a major milestone for Jason's fledgling company. "That's fantastic," I said sincerely. "Their environmental compliance issues are complex. This could really establish your credibility in the market." "I couldn't have done it without your help," Jason said. And for once, there was no manipulation behind the gratitude, just genuine acknowledgement. Not just the investment, but the introductions, the guidance on the proposal. Everything. "You did the hard work," I reminded him. "I just opened a few doors. Well, we need to celebrate. Dinner this weekend? My treat. Someplace nice." I agreed, and as I hung up, I reflected on how dramatically our sibling relationship had evolved. We weren't best friends and probably never would be, but we'd developed something we'd never had before. Mutual respect as adults with separate but occasionally intersecting paths. The celebration dinner extended beyond just Jason and me when he asked if he could invite our parents. I hesitated, but ultimately agreed, curious to see how the family dynamic would play out in this new context where both Jason and I had achievements to share. We met at Hamilton's, an upscale restaurant overlooking the river. I arrived first, followed shortly by Dad, then Jason with Mom on his arm. She looked elegant as always, but tense, her smile not quite reaching her eyes when she greeted me. "Lindsay, you look well," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "Success agrees with you." There was a hint of something in her tone. Not quite resentment, not quite admiration, perhaps a complicated mixture of both. The waiter seated us and took our drink orders. An awkward silence fell over the table until Dad, ever the peacemaker, raised his water glass. "I'd like to propose a toast to Jason and his new contract, and to Lindsay and her thriving new business. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder of both our children." Mom's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, but she raised her glass along with the rest of us. "To success," she said simply. As we ordered and began to eat, the conversation flowed more easily than I had anticipated. Jason described the challenging proposal process for the Mercer contract, giving me credit for helping him navigate the technical aspects of environmental compliance requirements. I shared stories from my consulting work, including a particularly difficult client who had finally embraced our sustainability recommendations after seeing the potential cost savings. "It's fascinating how you two have ended up in complementary fields," Dad observed, "almost like you could collaborate on certain projects." Jason and I exchanged glances, both of us clearly having had the same thought but neither wanting to push the idea too quickly. "We've actually discussed that possibility," I admitted. Jason's platform could streamline some of the monitoring and reporting processes my clients struggle with. "And Lindsay's consulting expertise could help my clients implement the changes needed to meet compliance standards," Jason added. "We're still figuring out how the businesses might intersect without creating conflicts of interest." Mom, who had been relatively quiet throughout the meal, suddenly spoke up. "I have to say, I'm surprised by all this. Cooperation between you two, especially after everything that happened with your grandfather's will." The table went silent. We had been carefully avoiding that particular topic all evening. "Diana," Dad warned softly, but Mom continued. "No, Robert, I think we should be able to discuss this openly. We're all adults here." She turned her attention to me. "Lindsay, I owe you an apology." I nearly choked on my wine. Of all the things I had expected her to say, that wasn't even on the list. When your grandfather left everything to you, I was hurt and angry. I saw it as him playing favorites, as him trying to control us even after he was gone. Mom's voice was steady, her gaze direct. "But watching how you've handled the inheritance, investing wisely, building something meaningful, even taking a chance on your brother when we all know his track record, I've come to see that Walter made the right choice." I sat stunned, unable to formulate a response. This was the mother who had accused me of manipulation, who had barely spoken to me for months, who had refused to set foot in Grandpa's house. "Mom," I finally managed, "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," she replied, her composure slipping slightly to reveal genuine emotion. "I've been holding on to my pride for too long. Watching both my children succeed these past months, not just financially but as people, has made me realize how petty I've been." Dad reached over and covered her hand with his, a gesture of support that spoke volumes about their own journey through this family upheaval. "We've all learned some difficult lessons," he said, "about ourselves, about each other. But maybe that was Walter's intention all along, not just to provide for Lindsay financially, but to force us all to re-examine how we relate to each other." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "Grandpa always played the long game. Even in chess, he'd make moves that seemed random until 10 turns later, when you realized he'd been setting up a strategy all along." I smiled at the memory, feeling a wave of gratitude for my grandfather's foresight and courage in making a decision he knew would cause short-term pain but potentially long-term healing. "Speaking of long games," Jason continued, turning to me with an eager expression, "I wanted to run something by you. A potential expansion of the business that would require additional investment, but could significantly increase our market share." Dad chuckled. "Some things never change. Jason always has another vision, another level to reach for. But there was affection rather than criticism in his observation, and Jason grinned good-naturedly. True, but this time I have actual data to back it up, not just big dreams. And I'm not looking for a handout. I'm looking for a strategic partner who'll hold me accountable. He glanced at me. What do you say, Linz? Want to hear my pitch? The fact that he was asking in this setting, in front of our parents, was significant. In the past, Jason would have approached me privately, using charm and emotional manipulation to secure funding before our parents even knew he needed it. This new transparency represented real growth. I'd be happy to hear your pitch, I said. Send me the business plan and we'll set up a proper meeting next week. Actually, Jason reached down beside his chair and pulled up a sleek leather portfolio. I brought it with me. Mom laughed, a genuine sound that I realized I hadn't heard in months. Some things definitely never change, always prepared with the sales pitch. But there was no bitterness in her tone, just wry acknowledgement of her son's persistent nature. We spent the rest of dinner reviewing Jason's expansion plans, with Dad offering valuable insights from his corporate experience, and Mom occasionally interjecting with surprisingly astute questions about market positioning. It wasn't a conventional family dinner conversation, but it felt more authentic than any interaction we'd had in years. All of us bringing our true selves to the table rather than playing assigned roles. As we waited for dessert, Mom reached into her purse and pulled out a small, velvet-covered box. I have something for you, Lindsay. I've been waiting for the right moment, and this feels like it. She slid the box across the table to me. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant, a chess piece, specifically a queen. This was your grandfather's last gift to me, Mom explained, her voice soft with memory. He gave it to me about a month before he passed away. He said it was to remind me that in chess, the queen is the most powerful piece because she can move in any direction. She met my eyes directly. He said I should remember that strength comes from flexibility, from adaptability, not from rigid expectations. I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but I think I do now. I lifted the necklace from the box, deeply moved by both the gift and the insight into my grandfather's final communications with my mother. It's beautiful, thank you. I think he would want you to have it, Mom said. You embody that principle better than I ever did. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of our desserts, but the significance of the exchange lingered as we enjoyed our coffee and shared plates of the restaurant's famous chocolate torte. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, Dad insisted on picking up the check, despite Jason's protests that this was supposed to be his celebration dinner. Tonight ended up being about much more than just Jason's contract, Dad said, firmly. It's about our family finding a new equilibrium, a healthier way of relating to each other. That's worth celebrating. Standing on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, we exchanged goodbyes with a newfound warmth. Mom actually hugged me, a real embrace rather than the air kiss formality of our greeting. Will you come to the house? Soon? I asked her impulsively. I've finished the kitchen renovation. I think you'll like what I've done with it. A shadow of hesitation crossed her face, then cleared. I'd like that, she said. Maybe next weekend? Perfect. Sunday brunch? We'll be there, Dad answered for both of them, his expression conveying how significant he knew this invitation was. Jason slung an arm around my shoulders in a casual half-hug. Want me to bring the business plan backups on Sunday too? We could go through them after Mom and Dad leave. Let's make Sunday just family time, I suggested. We can schedule a proper business meeting later in the week. He nodded, understanding the boundary I was setting between our personal and professional relationships. As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. The inheritance that had initially caused such turmoil had become a catalyst for growth and change, not just for me, but for my entire family. We were finding our way toward a new normal, one built on honesty, respect, and recognition of each person's unique value. Back at the house, I walked through the rooms that had gradually transformed under my care. The kitchen was now a bright, welcoming space with sustainable bamboo cabinets and energy-efficient appliances. The formal dining room had been converted into a home office where I often worked on weekends. The gardens had been revitalized with native plants that required less water and provided habitat for local pollinators. In each space, I'd found a balance between honoring Grandpa's legacy and creating something that reflected my own vision. It seemed an apt metaphor for what I was doing with his financial inheritance as well. I ended the evening as I always did, in the study that remained largely unchanged, writing in my journal about the day's events. As I recorded the unexpected reconciliation with my mother, the promising developments in Jason's business, and my own growing confidence as an entrepreneur, I realized that the true value of Grandpa's inheritance wasn't measured in dollars. The real gift had been the opportunity to redefine myself and my place in the family, to move from being the invisible, reliable daughter to becoming a visible, respected individual with agency and purpose. The money had been the catalyst, but the transformation was my own accomplishment. I closed the journal and gently touched the queen pendant, now hanging around my neck. Strength from flexibility, the power to move in any direction, the freedom to chart my own course while remaining connected to those I loved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, business decisions to make, relationships to nurture, a legacy to build. But tonight, in the quiet of the house that symbolized both my past and my future, I felt ready for whatever came next. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just being seen, but truly seeing myself clearly at last. 1 year after receiving my grandfather's inheritance, I stood at the large windows of my company's new office space, watching the first snowfall of winter dust the city. Reynolds Environmental Partners had grown faster than even my most optimistic projections, expanding from just me and 1 employee to a team of 8 dedicated professionals. We had outgrown my modest first office within 6 months, necessitating this move to a renovated historic building with enough room for our current staff and future growth. The space reflected my values and vision, open and collaborative, but with quiet areas for focused work, energy-efficient systems throughout, furnishings made from sustainable materials, plants bringing life and improved air quality to every corner. It was a physical manifestation of what I'd been building since standing my ground at that fateful family meeting. A life and business aligned with my principles rather than shaped by others' expectations. "The conference room is all set up for the Westlake presentation," said Mia, my operations director and first hire. Her arrival pulled me from my reflective state back to the busy present. "The clients should be here in 20 minutes. Do you want to do a final run-through?" "Yes, let's do that," I replied, following her to our glass-walled conference room where the rest of the presentation team was already assembled. The Westlake Corporation represented our biggest potential client, yet a regional manufacturing conglomerate looking to overhaul their environmental practices across multiple facilities. Landing this contract would not only secure our financial future for the next 2 years, but would create a showcase project demonstrating that sustainability and profitability could work hand in hand even in traditional industries. As we reviewed our presentation slides and talking points, I felt a familiar blend of nervous energy and confident readiness. This was what I had been preparing for throughout my career, even before I had the courage to strike out on my own. The technical knowledge, the strategic vision, the ability to translate complex environmental considerations into practical business solutions. I had built these skills methodically over years, often without recognition or reward. Now they were the foundation of my success. "Remember," I told my team as we concluded our review, "Westlake isn't just looking for regulatory compliance. They want innovation that gives them a market advantage. Our approach has to demonstrate both immediate benefits, and long-term vision. They nodded, everyone clear on their roles and ready to shine. I felt a surge of pride in this team I'd assembled, each person bringing unique strengths but united by shared values and commitment to our mission. The Westlake executives arrived right on time, a group of 5 led by their CEO, Richard Westlake himself. I greeted them in the reception area, noting with interest that the legendary businessman was not at all what I had expected from his stern press photos. In person, he had warm eyes and a genuine smile that put everyone at ease. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I've heard impressive things about your firm. I'm looking forward to seeing if they're true." "I hope we'll exceed your expectations, Mr. Westlake," I replied with confidence. The presentation went even better than we had rehearsed. Each team member delivered their section flawlessly, and I guided the overall narrative, emphasizing how our comprehensive approach would transform Westlake's environmental impact while enhancing their bottom line and public image. The executives asked tough, insightful questions that showed they had done their homework and were serious about this initiative. 2 hours later, after the Westlake team had departed with promises of a decision within the week, my staff gathered in the kitchen area to decompress. "That went really well," Mia said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Mr. Westlake seemed particularly engaged during the renewable energy section. I nodded, allowing myself to feel cautiously optimistic. His questions were specific and thoughtful. That usually indicates genuine interest rather than just going through the motions. As we were discussing next steps, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Heard Westlake was meeting with you today. How did it go? Want to grab coffee after work?" I smiled at this new dynamic between us, professional peers who supported each other's endeavors rather than rivals competing for family approval. "Meeting went well. Coffee sounds great. Usual place at 5:30? I texted back. His reply came quickly. "Perfect. I might have some interesting news to share." That intrigued me. Jason had been making steady progress with his compliance software company, hitting the milestones we had agreed upon and even securing a few significant clients on his own. My initial investment had proven sound, and I was considering his proposal for additional funding to support expansion. The afternoon passed in a flurry of follow-up emails, team debriefs, and preparation for the next day's client meetings. At 5:20, I grabbed my coat and headed out, walking the few blocks to Caffeine and Kodai, the independent coffee shop halfway between our respective offices that had become our regular meeting spot. Jason was already there when I arrived, laptop open. At a corner table, 2 steaming mugs waiting. He looked up and waved me over, his expression animated with barely contained excitement. "I ordered your usual," he said as I sat down across from him. "Earl Grey with honey." "Thanks." I took a grateful sip of the hot tea. "So, what's this interesting news?" Jason closed his laptop, leaning forward eagerly. "I got a call from Dan Westlake this morning." "Dan Westlake?" I repeated. "As in Richard Westlake's son?" "The very same. He's heading up their technological innovation division. Apparently, during their due diligence on your company, my compliance platform came up. They're interested in possibly integrating it into whatever environmental system they implement." I processed this information, seeing both the opportunity and the potential complications. "That's fantastic, Jason. But if Westlake becomes my client, we'd need to be careful about any collaboration between our companies. No appearance of favoritism or conflict of interest." "Already thought of that," Jason said, sliding a document across the table. "I had my lawyer draft this. It's an arm's-length transaction framework. Essentially creates a firewall between any work you might do for Westlake and any services they might purchase from my company." I skimmed the document, impressed once again by my brother's growth. A year ago, he would have rushed into an opportunity like this without considering the professional ethics involved. Now he was thinking steps ahead, protecting both our businesses and reputations. "This looks solid," I acknowledged. "I'll have my lawyer review it, but it's a good start." "What exactly is Dan Westlake envisioning?" Jason explained the preliminary discussions, his technical knowledge evident as he detailed how his software could enhance the environmental management systems my team would be designing for Westlake. We spent the next hour sketching potential approaches, careful to maintain appropriate boundaries while exploring genuine synergies between our companies. "It's weird," Jason said as our conversation wound down. "A year ago, I would have seen this as a competition, trying to get a bigger piece of the Westlake pie than you, seeking Mom and Dad's approval for landing a connection with such a prestigious company." "And now?" I prompted, curious about his perspective. "Now I see how much more powerful it is when we each excel in our own lanes but find ways to create something better together than either of us could alone." He shook his head, smiling ruefully. "Grandpa would say it took me long enough to figure that out." "He'd be proud of how far you've come," I said sincerely. "Both of us," Jason corrected, "though he always saw your potential clearly. It took the rest of us longer to catch up." That simple acknowledgement meant more to me than any apology or grand gesture could have. It represented a fundamental shift in how my brother perceived me, as a competent, successful person in my own right, not just a supporting character in his story. Our conversation shifted to family matters. Sunday brunches at my house had become a monthly tradition, gradually healing old wounds and creating new, healthier patterns of interaction. Mom had even started helping me restore Grandpa's garden, finding common ground in our shared love of nurturing growing things. "Mom mentioned you might host Thanksgiving this year," Jason said, "at Grandpa's house." "I'm thinking about it," I admitted. "It feels right somehow, bringing the family together there, continuing traditions while creating new ones." Jason nodded thoughtfully. It would be the first major holiday without Grandpa. All the more reason to honor him by gathering in the home he created. As we prepared to leave, Jason hesitated, then asked, "Have you heard from Mr. Harmon lately?" The question surprised me. "Not since the quarterly trust review last month?" "Why?" "He called me yesterday, asked if I could come to his office next week, said there was something Grandpa had arranged that involves both of us. But he wouldn't elaborate. This was unexpected. He didn't mention anything to me." "Probably nothing major," Jason shrugged, though his expression suggested he was as curious as I was. "Maybe some family heirloom Grandpa wanted me to have now that I've proven I'm not completely irresponsible." We laughed, but I made a mental note to call Mr. Harmon the next day. If there was another aspect to Grandpa's estate plan that was only now coming to light, I wanted to be prepared. The following morning brought an email from Richard Westlake himself. Westlake Corporation wanted to proceed with Reynolds Environmental Partners as their sustainability consultant. The contract would be the largest in my company's short history, a true game changer that validated both my business model and the decision to leave my corporate job. I shared the news with my team, acknowledging their exceptional work while emphasizing that this was just the beginning of an intensive project that would test all our capabilities. Their excited chatter filled the office as they began discussing implementation plans and resource allocation. In the midst of the celebration, I slipped away to my private office to call Mr. Harmon. His assistant put me through immediately. "Lindsay, I was planning to call you today," the lawyer said warmly. "I assume Jason mentioned our conversation?" "He did. He said you wanted to meet with both of us about something Grandpa arranged?" "That's correct. Are you available next?" "Tuesday at 2 p.m.? I can make that work. What's this about, Mr. Harmon?" There was a slight pause before he answered. Walter set up what we might call a second phase of his estate plan to be implemented 1 year after the initial inheritance, contingent upon certain conditions being met. "What kind of conditions?" I asked, intrigued. "I'd prefer to discuss the details in person. with both you and Jason present. But I can tell you that Walter would be very pleased with how things have unfolded. This cryptic response only heightened my curiosity, but I respected Mr. Harmon's desire to follow Grandpa's instructions precisely. We confirmed the appointment time, and I returned to my team's ongoing celebration, my mind now split between the exciting new Westlake contract and wondering what Grandpa had planned from beyond the grave. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity: contract negotiations with Westlake, staffing plans for the project, media interest in our growing company, and preparation for a speaking engagement at a national sustainability conference. I barely had time to think about the mysterious meeting until Tuesday arrived. Jason and I met in the lobby of Mr. Harmon's office building, both of us arriving early out of curiosity. "Any idea what this is about?" Jason asked as we rode the elevator to the 14th floor. "None." Mr. Harmon was deliberately vague. "Classic Grandpa move," Jason observed. "Always had a flair for the dramatic reveal." Mr. Harmon welcomed us into the same conference room where I had first learned about my inheritance a year ago. A folder lay on the table, along with a small wooden box I didn't recognize. "Thank you both for coming," the lawyer said, gesturing for us to sit. Walter was very specific about the timing of this meeting. He wanted exactly 1 year to pass from the reading of his will, and he established certain benchmarks that needed to be achieved before this next phase could be implemented. "Benchmarks?" I repeated, exchanging puzzled glances with Jason. "Yes." Walter was, as you know, a meticulous planner. He outlined specific outcomes he hoped his estate plan would facilitate. Mr. Harmon opened the folder. These included Lindsay establishing her own business, Jason demonstrating financial responsibility and meaningful professional growth, and, perhaps most importantly, a healthier relationship dynamic developing between all family members. I felt a chill run down my spine at the realization that Grandpa had anticipated these outcomes with such precision. He hadn't just left me his money. He had designed a comprehensive plan to address deep-seated family patterns. Through our regular conversations over the past year, Lindsay, and through the reports I requested from Jason regarding his business development, I've been able to confirm that these benchmarks have indeed been met. Mr. Harmon smiled warmly at both of us. Walter would be extremely pleased. "So what happens now?" Jason asked, his usual impatience tempered with genuine curiosity. Mr. Harmon slid the wooden box toward the center of the table. Walter established a second trust, separate from the main inheritance. This trust contains funds specifically allocated for a joint venture between his grandchildren. "A joint venture?" I repeated, surprised. "Yes." He believed that you two, working together with your complementary strengths, could create something more meaningful than either of you could accomplish separately. Jason and I looked at each other, both clearly thinking of our recent discussions about potential collaboration on the Westlake project. The trust contains $500,000 to be used as seed capital for a business endeavor that meets certain criteria, Mr. Harmon continued. The venture must have environmental sustainability at its core, must leverage both of your professional expertise, and must include a component that gives back to the community. He opened the wooden box, revealing an old-fashioned brass key nestled on velvet lining. This key is symbolic rather than functional. Walter wanted it to represent unlocking potential through collaboration. I reached out and touched the key gently, feeling a wave of emotion at this final gift from my grandfather. Not just financial resources, but a vision for healing and growth that extended beyond his lifetime. "There's more," Mr. Harmon said, extracting a sealed envelope from the folder. Walter recorded a second video message, to be viewed only if the conditions were N. He set up his laptop on the conference table, inserted a memory drive, and a moment later, Grandpa's face appeared on the screen. He looked exactly as he had in the first video, Same study, same sweater, same piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through the camera lens to the future where his grandchildren would be watching. "Hello, Lindsay and Jason," he began, his familiar voice filling the room. "If you're viewing this, then a year has passed since my departure, and you've both taken important steps toward becoming the people I always knew you could be." He shifted slightly in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I've lived long enough to understand that family dynamics are complex and often deeply rooted in patterns established long ago. The uneven distribution of my estate was never meant as a punishment or a reward, but as a catalyst, a disruption to patterns that were holding all of you back." Jason reached over and briefly squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the truth in our grandfather's words. "Lindsay," Grandpa continued, "I left you my estate because I trusted your judgment, your integrity, and your vision. I believed you would use those resources not just to secure your own future, but to create something meaningful that reflects your values." His gaze seemed to shift slightly, as if he were now looking directly at Jason. "And Jason, I limited your immediate inheritance because I believed you needed to develop self-reliance and discipline before resources could truly benefit you, rather than enable self-defeating patterns. But my larger hope was that this arrangement would eventually bring you together as equals, each respecting the other's unique strengths. The funds in this second trust represent my investment in that partnership." Grandpa leaned forward, his expression intense. "The greatest legacies aren't built by individuals working alone, but by people combining their talents toward a common purpose." Lindsay's practical wisdom and environmental expertise, Jason's technological innovation and entrepreneurial drive, together, these could create something truly significant. He sat back, a small smile playing at his lips. "I won't prescribe exactly what this joint venture should be. That vision must come from you. But I believe that by working together, you'll not only heal old wounds but build something neither of you could have imagined separately." His expression softened. "I may be gone, but through your collaboration, something of my values and hopes will live on, not as a burden of expectation, but as an opportunity to create your own legacy. Remember what I've always told you both. Wealth doesn't make a person. What makes a person is what they build with their own hands, how they treat others when nobody's watching, and the legacy they create that extends beyond their own lifetime." The video ended, leaving Jason and me in stunned silence. Mr. Harmon quietly closed his laptop, giving us space to process Grandpa's final message. "He planned all of this," Jason finally said, his voice hushed with awe. "From the beginning." "The long game," I murmured, recalling our conversation at the restaurant months ago. Mr. Harmon nodded. "Walter spent considerable time mapping out this approach. He believed that simply dividing his estate equally between you would perpetuate existing family dynamics rather than challenging them. I thought about how differently things might have unfolded if Grandpa had taken the conventional route. The inheritance would have been a momentary windfall rather than a transformative catalyst. Jason might have quickly burned through his portion, without developing the business discipline he now possessed. Our parents might have continued their pattern of unequal support, and I might never have found the courage to start my own company or redefine my place in the family. "The trust documents are here for your review," Mr. Harmon said, indicating another folder. "There's no immediate deadline for utilizing these funds. Walter wanted you to take the time needed to develop the right concept for your collaboration." As we left Mr. Harmon's office an hour later, after reviewing the trust details, Jason and I walked in contemplative silence to the nearby park. We found a bench overlooking a small pond where winter ducks were gliding across the partially frozen surface. "So," Jason said finally, "Grandpa Walter, master chess player, making moves from beyond the grave." I laughed softly. He certainly knew us well, knew exactly what buttons to push to create the changes he wanted to see. "Do you think he anticipated how things would actually unfold?" Your company, my software platform, the Westlake opportunity? I considered this. Not the specific details, perhaps, but the general direction? Yes. He saw patterns and possibilities that were invisible to the rest of us. Jason nodded thoughtfully. What do you think about this joint venture idea? Is it something you'd want to pursue? I paused, organizing my thoughts. I think Grandpa was right about the potential of combining our strengths, and the timing with Westlake is almost eerie, as if he somehow knew our paths would converge around a project like this. The compliance software I've developed for individual companies could be expanded into a comprehensive platform for entire supply chains, Jason mused, his entrepreneurial mind already racing ahead. If we integrated that with your consulting approach, created something that not only monitored environmental metrics, but actively guided companies toward more sustainable practices. We could potentially transform how businesses approach sustainability. I finished his thought. Make it more accessible, more measurable, more integrated into everyday operations rather than a separate initiative. We spent the next hour on that park bench, despite the December chill, sketching the outlines of what such a venture might look like. The excitement of creation, of building something innovative and meaningful, warmed us more effectively than our winter coats. As the early winter darkness began to fall, we walked back toward the parking garage where we'd both left our cars. What would we call it? Jason asked. This joint venture? I thought for a moment, then smiled. What about legacy systems? It works on multiple levels: technological systems, environmental systems, and honoring the legacy Grandpa created through his unconventional approach to his estate. Legacy systems, Jason repeated, testing the name. I like it. Grandpa would approve of the chess reference, too. How individual pieces working together create something more powerful than they could alone. As we reached our cars, Jason turned to me with an unexpectedly serious expression. Thank you, Lindsay. For what? For not giving up on me. For holding me to higher standards instead of writing me off as a lost cause. For seeing potential in me even when I wasn't seeing it in myself. His sincerity caught me off guard. That's what family should do, I said simply. See the best in each other and help bring it out. Well, we're finally learning how, Jason replied. Better late than never. As I drove home to Grandpa's house, my house that evening, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. What had begun as a shocking inheritance that triggered family conflict had evolved into something far more valuable than money. Authentic relationships based on mutual respect, personal growth that extended beyond financial success, and now, a vision for collaboration that honored our grandfather's legacy while creating our own. The brass key from Grandpa's wooden box now hung from my keychain, not because it opened any physical lock, but because it represented something profound, the unlocking of potential that occurs when old patterns are disrupted and new possibilities emerge. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the Westlake project to launch, the joint venture to develop, family relationships to continue nurturing. But tonight, as I pulled into the driveway of the home that had become both my sanctuary and my launching pad, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the inheritance that had changed everything. Not just the financial resources, but the courage to stand firm in my own worth, the wisdom to recognize healthy boundaries, and the vision to build something meaningful from both. Grandpa's final gift hadn't been money at all. It had been perspective, the ability to see myself and my family clearly, to recognize patterns without being bound by them, to imagine a different future, and take the first brave steps toward creating it. That was a legacy worth building upon. 3 years had passed since that fateful family meeting where I had stood my ground against pressure to sign over my inheritance. Standing at the podium in the Westlake Corporation's headquarters auditorium, I surveyed the audience of industry leaders, government officials, and press gathered for the official launch of Legacy Systems. the joint venture that had grown from Grandpa Walter's final gift. Environmental sustainability isn't just about compliance or public image, I said, my voice steady with the confidence that comes from deep conviction. It's about recognizing that business success and environmental responsibility aren't competing interests, but complementary forces. Our platform doesn't just help companies track their environmental impact. It transforms how they view their relationship with the natural world and the communities they serve. I gestured to the large screen behind me, where our company logo, AI, stylized tree with circuit board patterns in the trunk and branches, was displayed alongside impressive metrics from our pilot programs. In just 18 months of beta testing, companies using legacy systems have reduced their carbon emissions by an average of 32%, decreased water usage by 41%, and improved their regulatory compliance scoring by 87%, all while increasing operational efficiency and reducing costs. The numbers spoke for themselves, but what the metrics couldn't capture was the journey that had brought us here, the personal growth, healed relationships, and transformation of values that had made this moment possible. As I concluded my portion of the presentation and introduced Jason, who would demonstrate the technical aspects of our platform, I felt a surge of pride watching my brother take the stage with confident professionalism. Gone was the entitled young man whose business ventures had been fueled by family handouts and magical thinking. In his place stood a focused entrepreneur whose innovative software was genuinely changing how companies approached environmental management. "Thank you, Lindsay," Jason said, smoothly taking over. "What makes legacy systems different is its integration of compliance requirements, operational efficiency, and forward-looking sustainability planning into a single intuitive platform." As he launched into the technical demonstration, I stepped to the side of the stage where I could see our parents sitting in the front row. Dad gave me a subtle thumbs up, his expression radiating pride. Mom, elegant as always, dabbed discreetly at her eyes with a tissue. Beside them sat Mr. Harmon, who had become not just our lawyer, but a trusted advisor and friend. The journey to this moment had been filled with challenges, setbacks, and unexpected breakthroughs. After receiving Grandpa's second trust and the brass key that symbolized our potential collaboration, Jason and I had spent 6 months developing the concept for legacy systems, meticulously integrating his compliance software with my environmental consulting framework to create something genuinely innovative. We had presented our business plan to a panel of advisors that included Mr. Harmon, Dad, whose corporate experience proved invaluable, and 3 industry experts who asked tough questions and pushed us to refine our approach. The $500,000 from Grandpa's trust provided our seed funding, but we had been determined to build something that could attract additional investment on its own merits. Our big break had come through the Westlake project. As my consulting firm implemented sustainability initiatives across their manufacturing facilities, Jason's compliance software had proven so effective that Richard Westlake himself had taken notice. "You two have something unique here," he had told us during a project review meeting. "Not just technically solid, but visionary. Have you considered scaling this approach beyond a single client implementation?" That conversation had led to Westlake becoming our first significant outside investor, providing both capital and credibility as we developed legacy systems from concept to market-ready product. The relationship had evolved into a true partnership, with Westlake serving as our beta test site and Richard becoming a mentor who shared decades of business wisdom. Now, as I watched Jason explain how our system could simulate various sustainability interventions and project their impact across a company's operations, I marveled at how perfectly our strengths complemented each other. My practical environmental expertise and strategic vision paired with his technical innovation and entrepreneurial drive had created something neither of us could have built alone, exactly as Grandpa had foreseen. After the formal presentation concluded, we moved to the reception area for the networking portion of the event. As industry leaders approached to discuss potential implementations at their companies, I made sure to engage meaningfully while keeping an eye out for my parents. This was their first time seeing Jason and me in our professional element together, and I wanted to share the moment with them. I finally spotted them near the refreshment table, deep in conversation with Richard Westlake. As I approached, I caught snippets of their discussion. "You must be incredibly proud of what they've accomplished," Richard was saying. "We are," Dad replied, "though I can't claim much credit for their success. If anything, they've succeeded, despite our parenting mistakes, not because of them." "Robert," Mom protested softly, but without real conviction. "It's true, Diana," Dad said gently. "We didn't always see their individual potential clearly. Thankfully, they found their own paths." "With some help from a very wise father-in-law," Mom added, her expression softening with acceptance that had been long in coming. Richard Westlake nodded thoughtfully. "Family dynamics are complex. My own father was a tough businessman who expected me to follow exactly in his footsteps. It took years for us to find the right balance of respecting his legacy while creating my own." "That sounds familiar," I said as I joined their circle. Richard smiled warmly. "Lindsay, excellent presentation. You and Jason make a formidable team." "Thank you. And thank you for taking a chance on our vision." "Hardly a chance," he replied. "It was one of the most solid investments I've made in decades. Speaking of which," he gestured across the room where his son Dan was engaged in animated conversation with Jason. "I think my son is trying to convince your brother to consider additional applications for the platform." I laughed. Jason's probably pitching back just as hard. They bring out each other's entrepreneurial instincts. As Richard excused himself to greet other guests, I turned to my parents. "What do you think, seeing it all come together like this?" Dad pulled me into an unexpected hug. "I think your grandfather would be bursting with pride, as are we." "It's remarkable," Mom added, her voice holding genuine admiration. "Not just the business itself, but seeing how you and Jason work together. There's a harmony there that I never would have anticipated 3 years ago." The observation touched me deeply because it acknowledged not only our professional success, but the personal growth and healing that had made it possible. Mom had come a long way from the woman who had accused me of manipulating Grandpa for financial gain. "We've all changed," I said softly. "That was Grandpa's real gift, creating circumstances that allowed us to see ourselves and each other more clearly." The rest of the reception passed in a blur of introductions, discussions of potential implementations, and fielding questions from industry reporters. By the time the event concluded, Jason and I had a list of 15 companies interested in pilot programs and 3 potential investment partners. As the crowd thinned, Jason found me near the exit. "Success by any measure," he said, his expression both exhausted and exhilarated. "Westlake's team is already talking about expanding our platform to their international facilities." "One step at a time," I cautioned, though I shared his excitement. "Let's make sure the domestic rollout is flawless before we go global." He laughed. "Always the practical one. That's why we work well together. You keep my ambitions grounded in reality." "And you push my practical plans toward bigger possibilities," I acknowledged. We had learned to value these complementary perspectives rather than allowing them to become sources of friction. What once might have devolved into Jason dismissing me as too cautious or me seeing him as recklessly ambitious had evolved into genuine respect for our different approaches. "Mom and Dad want to take us to dinner to celebrate," Jason said. "That new place overlooking the harbor." "Perfect. Let me just finish up with the Westlake PR team about the press release, and I'll meet you there." By the time I arrived at the restaurant an hour later, the sun was setting over the harbor, casting golden light across the water. My family had secured a table on the terrace with a spectacular view. As I approached, I was surprised to see not just Mom, Dad, and Jason, but also Mr. Harmon and Eliza, my friend who had supported me through every step of this journey. "There she is," Dad called out, rising to pull out a chair for me. "The woman of the hour." "Co-star at best," I corrected, nodding toward Jason. This was truly a team effort. "Which calls for champagne?" Mom declared, signaling the waiter. As glasses were distributed and filled with bubbling champagne, Dad stood to offer a toast. 3 years ago, such a moment would have inevitably centered on Jason's achievements, with mine mentioned as an afterthought. Now, Dad looked at both of us with equal pride. "To Lindsay and Jason," he said, raising his glass, "for showing us that the strongest legacy isn't built on money or material possessions, but on values, vision, and the courage to forge your own path. You've honored your grandfather while creating something entirely your own." "And to Walter," Mr. Harmon added, "whose unconventional approach to his estate created opportunities for growth none of us could have anticipated." We clinked glasses, and as I sipped the champagne, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from that tense family meeting to this moment of genuine celebration and connection. After dinner, as the others continued chatting over dessert, I slipped away to the terrace railing to enjoy a moment of quiet reflection. The city lights were coming on, mirrored in the dark harbor waters, creating a sense of expansive possibility. Mr. Harmon joined me, his kind face thoughtful in the twilight. "Walter would have loved to see this," he said softly. "Not just the business success, though he would certainly appreciate that, but the way the family has evolved." "I think about him every day," I admitted, "especially when Jason and I are working through challenges with legacy systems. I often find myself asking, what would Grandpa say about this approach?" Mr. Harmon nodded. "That's the truest form of legacy, when someone's values and wisdom continue to guide decisions long after they're gone." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small envelope. "Speaking of which, I have something for you. Walter left this with me, to be given to you on the day Legacy Systems officially launched." I accepted the envelope with trembling fingers, recognizing Grandpa's distinctive handwriting spelling out my name. "He planned for this specific moment." "Walter was nothing if not thorough in his planning," Mr. Harmon replied with a small smile. "I'll give you some privacy." As he returned to the table, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of Grandpa's personal stationery, bearing a brief message in his slightly shaky handwriting. "My dearest Lindsay, if you're reading this, then Legacy Systems has officially launched, and you and Jason have achieved what I always believed possible: creating something meaningful together that honors your individual strengths while transcending personal differences. Remember when I taught you chess? I told you that the queen is powerful, not because she dominates the board, but because she moves with purpose and vision in any direction necessary to protect what matters. You have been the queen in this family's game, Lindsay. Not by dominating others, but by moving with integrity and wisdom, protecting what truly matters while creating space for everyone to find their best position. The true measure of wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you set in motion. By that standard, you are rich beyond measure. With love and pride, Grandpa Walter tears blurred my vision as I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my purse. Even now, years after his passing, Grandpa was still offering guidance and validation at exactly the right moment. I rejoined the table, where conversation had turned to plans for expanding Legacy Systems' Community Impact Program, an initiative that partnered with schools in underserved areas to provide environmental education and technology training. "We're thinking of naming the educational component after Grandpa," Jason was explaining to the others. "The Walter Reynolds Environmental Leadership Program." "He would be honored," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion, "especially since it focuses on building skills rather than just providing resources," I added, thinking of Grandpa's beliefs about true wealth building. As we discussed the program's details, I felt a profound sense of alignment between our business goals and personal values, between honoring the past and creating the future, between individual aspirations and shared purpose. 3 years ago, when my parents demanded I sign over my inheritance to help Jason's business, I could never have imagined where standing firm in my own worth would lead. What had seemed like the end of family harmony had actually been the beginning of something far more authentic and balanced. The painful confrontation had cracked open calcified patterns, allowing new growth and understanding to emerge. Grandpa's strategic distribution of his estate had been the catalyst, but the transformation had required all of us to examine our assumptions, acknowledge hard truths, and commit to healthier relationships. Later that evening, after saying goodbye to everyone, I drove back to Grandpa's house, the home that had become truly mine over the past 3 years. I had renovated it thoughtfully, preserving its character while updating systems for energy, efficiency, and adding my own touches that reflected both respect for its history and vision for its future. In the study that still held echoes of Grandpa's presence, I sat in what had been his chair, now mine, and placed his note on the desk beside the brass key from the wooden box, symbols of the inheritance that had gone far beyond financial resources. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Great night. Planning session tomorrow at 10? Have some ideas about the educational program." I smiled and replied, "Perfect. Bringing coffee and those scones you like." Such a simple exchange, yet it represented a profound shift from the manipulative, imbalanced interactions of our past. We had become not just business partners, but genuine allies who respected each other's strengths and supported each other's growth. I opened my journal, a habit I had maintained since receiving the inheritance, and began to write about the launch event, the family dinner, and Grandpa's final note. As I reflected on the journey from resentment and invisibility to confidence and purpose, I realized that the most valuable inheritance hadn't been the money, the house, or even the business opportunity. It had been the courage to stand in my own truth when it would have been easier to capitulate. The wisdom to recognize that family love shouldn't require self-erasure. The vision to see possibilities beyond established patterns. Grandpa had given me financial resources, yes, but more importantly, he had created circumstances that allowed me to discover my own voice, worth, and power. He hadn't just left me his money, he had helped me claim my life. And in doing so, he had set in motion a transformation that extended far beyond me. To Jason finding purpose and discipline, to my parents recognizing and addressing their unequal treatment, to the creation of a business that was genuinely helping companies balance prosperity and responsibility. That was the ultimate legacy, not assets transferred, but values embodied, not just wealth inherited, but wisdom lived. As I closed my journal and prepared for bed, I felt a deep sense of gratitude mixed with anticipation for what lay ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges with legacy systems, ongoing evolution in family relationships, and continuing opportunities to honor Grandpa's faith in me through my choices and actions. The journey that had begun with that difficult family meeting had no final destination. It was a continuing path of growth, purpose, and authentic connection. But now I walked it with confidence, knowing that standing firm in my worth had not only changed my life, but created ripples of positive transformation that continued to spread in ways I could never have imagined. That realization wasn't just comforting, it was empowering. Every time we refuse to diminish ourselves to meet others' expectations, we create space for more authentic relationships and more meaningful contributions. Every time we honor our own value, we make it possible for others to discover theirs as well. Grandpa had understood this profound truth. Through his unconventional approach to his estate, he had given me the opportunity to experience it firsthand. And now, through legacy systems and our educational programs, Jason and I were extending that opportunity to others, creating our own legacy built on the foundation of the one we had inherited. As I drifted toward sleep, Grandpa's words from his final note echoed in my mind. The true measure of wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you set in motion. By that measure, the inheritance that had once seemed to tear my family apart had ultimately made us all immeasurably richer. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.